Hi, I'm the Sad Panda, and this is going to be the fourth episode in my series, I Read This, Should You?, where I give you a review on a book that I've read, or a manga, or a web novel, and you decide whether or not to read it based on the review I give. Now, obviously, I'll only go over the first 100 chapters or so as to not spoil everything. I'm going to try to keep it more succinct because my longer videos do tend to get less watch time. That's just what I'm paying attention to. So, I'm going to try to keep it under 15 this time. Usually, I tend to ramble and it gets to be 18, 19, 20 minutes, but we're going to keep it low this time. This episode is going to be on My Hermes System by Romru. In short, it's a story about a young boy named Evans who attempts to join a school for the gifted. After being shunned at the door for looking like a beggar, he is led into some sort of ambush by a couple other students, one of them being Gerald. We'll talk more about him later. But he is beaten and essentially left for dead, which does leave him untrusting of everyone around him, unfortunately. He eventually does get into the school, and he is taught how to use his system and how to train it and level up, and so on and so forth. The world Evans lives in is under siege constantly by portals and monsters that come out of the portals. 1,000 years ago in the lore, there was the first portal called, there was no name for the portal, but it was called the Portal Calamity. It was when the first portal opened up, monsters rained from the heavens, and conventional weapons that we see today, like handguns, rifles, missiles, grenades, were essentially useless on the higher tiered monsters. The only thing that it was good for is nuking us back into the Dark Ages, which is explained in one of the first few chapters. But after a few years of battling it out, trying to survive in this world, the first gifted was born. Now, they're called gifted, they're called system holders, they're called explorers, but I'm going to call them gifted for the time being of this history's sake. Now, these gifted were obviously young, so they couldn't fight, so they had to be protected for the majority of their life. Once they made it, once they got to the age where they could fight, their abilities turned out to work on these creatures. So they ended up killing the monsters and battling back the tide. But they didn't know how to close the portals until one of the gifted thought, why don't we go into the portal and see what's going on? It turns out that you have to defeat like a quote unquote boss and close the portal. So that's what we got there. And these gifted people then became explorers and system holders. Now I want to talk about Evan a little bit, and I want to talk about Gerald a little bit. These are two of the characters that we see a lot. Evan is a young boy who was born in the slums. He has a very hard life. I'm going to say right now that if you are kind of squeamish or anything like that, I would recommend you stop now. I'll give you a little thing here. He lives with his father, who is very abusive, not only physically but sexually abusive. And they don't go over this a whole lot, but there is a lot of things that not only hint to this, but is explicitly said in the story. Now, when I say earlier in my quick synopsis of the story that Evans was almost beaten to death and was left to die, the only reason he didn't is the other character I brought up, Gerald. Now, Gerald has a similar situation. The only thing is they're like opposite sides of the track, same story. So where Evans is a slum-born, like nobody, he's like illiterate when he tries to go to the school and stuff. He is dressed in rags and all this stuff. On the other side of the tracks, we have Gerald, who is born into a very rich family, like an aristocrat family, and his father is abusive, but not sexually, but emotionally and physically, where even though Gerald is a system holder and his father is not a system holder, so they are opposite sides of the power spectrum, where system holders have all the power in this world and non-system holders do not, he is still under like duress. He's like forced to take on they're like monster cores, and if you take in them, you can level up faster, you can gain more stats and stuff, but it is a painful process. It's not something that you can just, take in a core and gain a bunch of power for free. No, it's a very, very painful process, and the more you take in, the more painful it becomes. And Gerald, he lives with a super rich aristocratic family, so of course they have access to all of these cores, and he is forced to consume them every time he's at home, like indefinitely, just ruining his insides, like vomiting blood, like crazy stuff like that. And when he's feels like he's too weak to continue, his father will like beat him with like a cane or a stick or something and make him continue. And the only reason Gerald puts up with this is because his father told him that if he doesn't do it, it's going to be his younger brother that has to do it. And so Gerald takes on this, and he turns into a jaded person that hates pretty much everyone. He has a special hatred for beggars, which is why he ended up ambushing our Evan. I'm not going to explain why that is because that's later in the story, but he does have a special hatred for what he quote unquote beggars. And it puts a lot of things into perspective of the story. Like when we first meet Gerald, we don't know any of this about him. We don't know anything. So all we know is that he is some dark, like horrible person that would just beat up a kid for no reason and leave him to die. And that's what we know. Evans unlocking his system does become fairly powerful fairly quickly. He has the Hermes system, and if you don't know about Hermes, he's the messenger god, also god of speed and some other stuff that he is like side epithets and stuff. But he, in using this system, gets to run like Hermes, and he gets to like ferry souls to where they belong, like the fields of Asphodel, Elysium, Tartarus. These are the 3 locations he can bring these souls. And the only reason he learns that he can do this is because after he's beaten and left to die, he begs Gerald to stop, because in Evan's mind, he's like, it's just his dad. It's his dad's beating him, and he just begs. He's like, Dad, please don't. So Gerald stops because he's like, well, I've experienced that, and I don't want to have to look at this and think about what's going on in my life. So they leave, and he awakens his system, which allows him to run super, super fast, like faster than any car, any plane. Also, he can create like air platforms that he can step on so he can run through the air, which is essentially what Hermes is known for, his winged shoes, and he can fly around because he's so fast and he runs. That's the whole thing. But he ends up going back home because he left without telling his father that he's going to go and try to get into this school, because he does have a system and only system holders can get into this specific school. And he goes back, and his father like noticed that he was gone, and he's like, oh, I thought you left me, and then starts like trying to beat him again. And eventually he just blacks out, and when he wakes up, he's like under arrest essentially. His father's dead, but the guards turn kind of a blind eye because they hear like what's been going on in that guy's life, or in Evan's life. And so like one of the guards like pretty much puts her entire like reputation on the line and stuff to be like, no, your dad didn't die, you didn't kill him. So Evans doesn't know he did this. But he's like, no, you didn't kill him. You passed out. It was a rogue harpy that escaped a portal, and he gets to go to this school that she pays for, like a house that she pays for, because like of how like shitty his life is. But he eventually does learn that he did this because in his system it allows him to ferry these souls to where they belong based on the color of their soul. So when he kills somebody, their soul will like shine a different color. Like white, if it deserves to go to Elysium, it'll be like a gray, goldish. If it needs to go to Asphodel, and it'll be like black if it needs to go to Tartarus. And I'll explain what all these are. The Fields of Elysium is like the way it's described is like you go there and you get like a paradise. Everything that you could think of that you would like happening. Like you win the lottery, you have a beautiful wife, you have amazing kids, you have the house you want, you have the car you want. It's literally just like a perfect life that you get to live for eternity. The Fields of Asphodel is like monotony, is the same thing every day. It's like what we live now. Like you go to work, you go home, like nothing is the greatest, nothing is like awesome. Like sure, you have some ups, but it's a lot of just the same. And then Tartarus is like you're tortured for your sins. It's literally like hell. It is horrible. And so obviously he sends his father to Tartarus, which it does belong there because his soul is black, which is where the souls need to go. And he gets a bunch of XP for this. He gets a bunch of levels and he becomes very strong. Also, when he levels up, he gets a lot of like extra stats, which most people, when they level up, they get like one stat of each. So like one health stat, one strength stat, one speed stat. Like they just get one of each, but he gets like 2 or 3 of each. So even though he's a lower level than a lot of the people that he has to fight, he's still way stronger than them because he just gets more stats per level, which makes him very, very powerful. And I really like the story. It is kind of dark. It doesn't lighten up. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it and say that it gets to be nice and Evan lives a great life and blah 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 blah. No, it actually doesn't get all that better for Evan. Like he does, like for a little bit, it's okay, but then he ends up going to a place called the Pit, which is like the worst prison you could think of. It's literally a portal that is cleared of monsters essentially, except for the boss, and they just throw all of the people that have committed crimes, like horrible crimes, murder, that kind of stuff. They throw them in this place called the Pit, and they just live there forever. You can't get out because the Pit's portal is surrounded by like glyphs and wards and like thousands of guards, so you can't escape the Pit. It's just you go there and you die there. That's just the end of it. There's no sentencing. It's just bam, bam, over. So it does keep getting worse, and then eventually, like, I can't go over anymore actually because it would break my 100 chapter rule. So beyond that, I do think the story is good. It's pretty well written. Sometimes the grammar it's kind of wishy-washy and iffy, but it is a good story. I don't think it's as good as Chrysalis. I don't think it's as good as Bank of the Universe. I don't think it's as good as Lucifer's System. So I'm going to have to give it like a 6, maybe like a 5.8, but around there. And if you're squeamish, I don't know if you would like to read it. It's pretty dark. I liked it because I'm not a fan of the good guy always wins, the bad guy always dies, that kind of stuff. I'm very into realism, even if it's like a fantasy novel. I'm into like the realistic aspects of like the good guy there's trials, there's sometimes decisions that you have to make that are hard. There are things that you can't control, and that's just the way life is. And I like that kind of aspect in these kind of stories, which is why I give it like a 6 instead of giving it like a 4 or a 3 for how dark it is. But yeah, so if you do like my content, please like and subscribe. Leave a comment and I'll respond to all of them. And if you don't like my content, please leave a comment because I would like to know what I need to do better. I'm trying to keep this short and succinct. That's why this one's going to be a little shorter than the others. It should have more editing. I'm going to put in more pictures. Also, let me know in the comments if you want me to also do reactions, like for music or trailers, stuff like that, for new anime, new books. Let me know.